Your burden down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will carry you. Lay your burden down. Well, I won't be doing that at Harvard either. I hope to come back here before I pass on to the other world so I can have some more fun. I just want to say how moved I am by the community here in Maui. Not only because there's, a lot of joy here, but also the potential for actualizing this community into an even greater network of support and inspiration and guidance is so present. For me, as a total outsider to your scene, I feel like I'm a person who came from another planet, and I'm looking around and I'm going, yeah, I'll work it through. Yeah, well, you are too, I'll tell you. So, and that Ram Dass and Bodhi B and Kathleen and Craig and Greg and many people in this community are gravitating to each other and toward each other in order to create a mandala of, it's sort of like reinitiating Maui into one of the holiest places in the world. And I'm so moved. First of all, I had the chance to be with Jim in Napili and to look at the coast from that perspective, and then I spent the night up in his beautiful place in Kula, and I got to look at the sweep of Maui and the western mountains, and it was like, holy mackerel. This is an amazing environment. And then meeting you all. And then being with Ram Dass and having that deep pleasure of being with an old friend. So I want to encourage you deeply to do what is coming naturally, but just an outsider is recognizing what you feel, but I really want you to know that I support it. And that is bringing the work of Bodhi and Ram Dass and my friend Margot Gal, who's just an amazing Ayurvedic healer and teacher of restorative yoga. Our people from hospice, to create a community, to unify the communities here for the purpose of this most powerful of rites of passage, the passage from life into death. And knowing that just as people go to Mount Kailash or to Varanasi in order to die, not that we want to increase your tourism with people who are, going to bring down your hospitals, but, it's to create a context where, sorry, I just see, but it's to create a place where you can die well and beautifully. And I want to say we know this naturally. I mean, this is all the stuff that we're talking about, and I mean, I know a lot of stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This is a manual on our 8-day training. It's so exhaustingly comprehensive. Anything you need to know. It's all here. Implementation. Good. Care plan. Right. Okay. Anticipatory grief versus sudden loss. You want that. Anticipated death. Setting the field for presence. Wonderful. Aging with dignity. Anyway, you can talk about this stuff You can study it, but it really is actualized through doing it. And don't worry, you'll get the chance. But it's nice to train up with people who are inspired, skilled, and also to set a field for this to happen. So I'm so fortunate to live in a beautiful physical environment, a Zen center, where we practice with this. I wish I had the photographs, but I can show you people who have died in the embrace of our community, and you can it's just amazing. The radiance of their presences as they are lying in state in our midst, but as we vigil with them in the after-death state. And also the chance to train, it's now thousands of caregivers, professional primarily, but many family caregivers and people like you who come through the place and are with people who, like Frank and others, who have just this total passion and heart for this work and who speak from experience. This is not theoretical. It's not just an idea. This is people who've been in the front lines with this work, working with PEDS death, that means pediatric deaths, which Joan was talking about. I mean, that's a subject that it takes a lifetime to unravel when a baby is born dead or when a child dies shortly after birth, an infant dies. Reminding me of the story of a mother who gave birth to a stillborn child. And the clinicians supported her request for her to bathe her dead infant in her breast milk. So part of our work is not simply caring for our own tribe, but it is, as Joan indicated, it takes so much time to make sense of a death of an infant, or really of any death. If we don't have the psyche, as Ram Dass does, to hold it with the quality of openness that allows for the possibility of liberation to be present for all of us. And to influence, for us now to dedicate to influence not only each other, which is okay, because you're creating a kind of tribe of who is dedicated to implementing the best circumstances possible for any kind of death. But also to influence the medical system, hospice, nurses, physicians, social workers, hospice administrators, hospital administrators, to understand that we really need to influence deeply the culture of medicine so it opens itself up again to the culture of healing. And to understand that curing is not always the option, but healing is always the option. So I'm having this kind of anticipatory grief moment. I'm leaving tonight. It's like, oi, it's just ridiculous. But that's life. And I want to be sure, I wanted to get my 2 cents in before we went to suicide. And go through all the gratitudes before I get Seiichi up here. And put my arms around my Japanese priest. Shouldn't do that, but there's an acculturation process that's going on here. That I really want you to be part of what is already happening, which is a gentle revolution, but a revolution nonetheless. We need you. We need your love, we need your commitment, and we need your energy. And we also need the trust that's in your relationships, because that is where the action happens. I mean, this does not happen between people who are frozen in their professions. This happens because Maui, for example, and its hospice can be a model literally for the world and how dying people are cared for, how teams are nurtured. and how this flows out into the community. And Doorway into the Light can be a model that influences the work that we do at Upaya and that is being cultivated in various parts of the world. So I just really say, we need you.
We're here for you, Joan. And we've got much the same model of what we're going to go into. Yeah. The community holding death. The community that I want to say one thing you were talking about.
Sure. No, talk about, sorry.
Talking about babies being I was having a conversation with Trungpa. Well, I was having a conversation with Trungpa Rinpoche. We were talking about aborting babies. And he said, well, it takes 2 to 3 souls. The soul of the mother and soul of the father and the soul of the baby. They take the decision. That's a Buddhist, you know.
So would it be okay, even though it is now close to 4:20, I think it's important for us to look into some questions around our relationship to 3 things. One is the management of our pain. 2 is the management of our care, specifically interventions. And 3 is the so-called management about whether we're going to continue our life or hasten our death. Is it all right if we open these subjects up? And I think these are really, again, this is not to go to solution, but it's to really, look at these questions honestly and bravely. I know RD has some opinions. I have some opinions. You guys have lots of experience. When we put it all together, there might be sort of a solution. But I want to really for us, Artie and I want to keep the conversation open. And we want to, again, come together in our small groups for about 15 minutes or, until we sort of feel it's complete, about 5 people in a group. And the three things we want to look at: power over our pain, whether it is to accept it completely or to get rid of it. Power over our intervention, whether it is to have or to have not, and if so, what and how. And power over the moment of death, which is to engineer it or to receive it when it is arising. It's a kind of weird way to end this day. We'll sing some and cheer about it. But, the deal is that there are some people here who have asked us to do this because these are questions in their lives. So we need to work together as small communities and come back as a big community, and let's work on this together. Is that okay? Small groups, whatever your issue is, of those 3 subjects, bring that forward and work it for a while. No, I don't want you to speak about each one. I want you to look at what your issue is. Whether what causes you the most anxiety, or something with which you have around which you have a strong idea. a really strong vision, or you have absolute confusion, unclarity, whether it is the issues around pain, and what are the questions that you're dealing with, and what do you think the solutions might be. The issue of should I seek interventions, strong interventions as I'm dying, and should I take my own life or should I not, or should I get a physician to, or should I not? This all has to do with our control over our lives, which taking our own life, writing advance directives and choosing or not choosing an intervention, or working with pain in ways that might not conform to what our physician feels is appropriate for us. Okay? Go for where your hot button is of those three topics. Speak to that. The same issue really applies in the substrate. So, and then let's come back and pearl dive. Thank you.
I have severe pain. I have had it for 19 years. And it was just a couple of years ago, I just said, I'm just exhausted all the time.
Exhausted from the pain.
And I finally succumbed to doctor's advice and started taking some sleeping pills and started taking some more severe pain medicine. And I now get hours in a day and time to meditate, or time to be with people, or time to just feel like I'm with myself, as opposed to being exhausted and being harried inside. So for me, and I think about this issue a lot, but I think that pain medicine that allows a person to be able to have some relief from pain. Pain medicine just to kind of numb oneself out to the whole total experience, I'd have a conversation about. But enough to at least to kind of give someone some relief, I think is a good thing. So, my 2 cents.
Do you feel your pain medicine affects your level of consciousness or your connection to spirit? Or anything?
It does. When the medicine comes on a point, I can feel my consciousness go through things, but over a period of time, you get to see it, and then you become the observer of that, and and then after a while, you kind of get back to a steady state, and if you accept the fact that we're not our body, that we're something much more than that, that to the extent we can have a practice that we can understand that and be with that, well, then you accept the fact that there's times, the body's kind of going through something, and you sit there and you wait for it to go through it, and then the body's not exhausted or whatever. So yes, it does affect it, but we're not our body. So
you have to kind of weigh the two.
Yeah, if you're just totally stressed out because you're in pain, then you don't have time to sit there and be the observer. You got to find a way to pop outside the ball of being within the structure, within the experience, and sometimes you got to calm the experiences down through use of medications in order to be able to give one a chance to be able to kind of get perspective of it, and then when it passes, you can do what you're going to do.
That's a quality of life issue. It's quality of life. It improves your quality of life to have the pain
Absolutely.
medication. Yeah, I'm all for that.
So
Definitely support that.
I've heard women that that really wanted to have a natural birth and not have any epidural or any drugs, and they're in labor and trying to have the baby, and then finally they're just not dilating, and then they take the epidural and they're able to relax enough to dilate to be able to birth the baby. So just having an openness. I think in my life I've had a tendency to want to be like, all alternative, all natural, blah blah blah.
right.
But seeing that the benefits of pharmaceuticals or Western medicine.
I was born in 46, and in those days it was very different. And my mother labored with me for 3 days, and I almost died, and she almost died. And it's better to have some medications to have helped that process along. So, anyway, it's a laudable goal, but there's times in which you kind of say, okay. And that's common sense has to prevail.
Intellectual
Excuse me?
It's an individual thing.
Yeah.
Having to do with one's threshold pain that also governs the decision.
Absolutely.
About how much and how
Right.
And moment to moment.
Has living with the pain that you have chronically brought you to thoughts of suicide? Can you speak a little about that?
Oh, yeah. I was shot, so I have in the spine. So I have what's called neuropathic pain. So right now, my nervous system is going crazy. And so, at times over the years, it was years before I could even do anything but lay down all day long. And so, in moments when you don't have any quality of life, the notions of taking your life, in fact, come to bear. And I was very close to suicide. So not me, but other people. So, and I got to the point where if a person feels that they just can't cope anymore, and that they're at peace with it, who am I to say? And I had these arguments over many, many years with a person, and the person finally took their life. And just recently, another friend took her life. And for her, I know that's what she needed to do. There was no joy at all left in this world for her. And she needed to pass on. So I think holding not judgments about anything. We all go through different parts. So I'm not against it. I don't think I'll ever get to the point I would do it to myself, but who knows?
What was the turning point where you chose to live?
Say that again, please.
What was your turning point where you chose to life or death? Do you remember there was a moment where you wanted to die?
I was alone. I didn't have any love in my life. I didn't have a sense of connection with other people. That there was no value in me being alive because I wasn't contributing anything to anybody else or the community and that I was just alone and consuming resources. And at that point, I'd probably say, okay, maybe it's time for me to consider that. Hopefully, I'll never get there. Then what happens?
Yeah, what made it turn around that you didn't do that?
What would happen to?
What happened to you that turned that around for you?
Joan, learning to meditate, and then just kind of doing things that brought love into my life.
How long ago was that?
A dozen years ago. Anyway, someone else. Get rid of some.
Pass it up. Okay. Who's in the hot seat?
You started the group.
I didn't start anything.
We talked about something else besides
Sure.
Pain management because we covered that. So either intervention or suicide.
Suicide's an interesting thing because in my life, I've had times in my life where I was really sad and I've contemplated suicide many, many times, which is really interesting. So when she said that, it's kind of like, wow, what would I do if I had like a really debilitating disease? Would I now I got a really good reason to take my life. It's not just an emotional thing. It's like, I'm tired of it. So it's really interesting. I'm really conflicted about it. So I don't have a clear answer on it. And I'm not sure if I would do that. I have this feeling that if it was a really long, debilitating disease, I might just choose to pick a moment and make that my moment and make it a ritual and make it a ceremony and go. But in this moment, I'm conflicted about it, so I don't have a clear answer about it. I have a possible thought about it, like that situation. But it's the whole thing of what she was saying about giving the example of people who lost everything in their life, lost power over their body, lost power over their relationships, but I'm going to keep power over my death. I'm going to choose that moment, and it's like your last, sort of like your last bit of will. And in that moment, you could be grabbing your own personal power to have that final ceremony, to have that final ritual. And, knowing me, I would pick a full moon astrological event that would be like, this is the day I go, and it's like, I'll have a whole ceremony with all my friends, and have this big party and have this whole big thing. And in one moment, I'll go to the other room and go. And no one might even know. That kind of a thing. Knowing me, that I would do something like that. But I don't have that as a plan in the moment or a thought. But knowing what I do, I would like. What's that?
Don't get so excited about it.
Well, I'm such a ritualist and ceremonialist. I love to pick those moments of time that are literally a moment of power. So why not choose that moment of power of your moment of leaving? And so in that instance, that would be it. For me.
What if you're being treated with drugs that cloud your mind?
Well, see, that's why I asked him the question about drugs and losing that.
I lost a girlfriend who shouldn't have died to drugs.
Yeah.
And they were from a psychiatrist who wasn't really taking care of her care, and she couldn't manage her moods, and there wasn't enough care, so she took her own life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
And that was a tragedy.
Sure, total tragedy.
That there was too many drugs administered, and they weren't appropriately
monitored.
Managed.
Yeah.
If you're going to give powerful drugs like that, there has to be really good management.
Oh, totally.
And feedback. And, I feel that was a big loss.
And I think that you're adding this issue about both choice and ritual and ceremony, so that someone who's really desperate that they realize that they could, in fact, empower the situation. That would make a big difference for people, Because sometimes when you realize you have a choice, well, then you choose otherwise. It's when you're totally desperate, you're backed up against the wall, that you have no power, not even over the power of your own life. You just kind of do it.
Well, that's why I asked you that question about, managing your pain and your level of consciousness, because that's one little fear I have, is that if I get in so much pain that I want drugs, but are the drugs going to make me lose my will and my presence? Because that's really important to me. And I wouldn't want that to happen, for me. And at the same time, I want to also manage the pain. If it gets to a point where it's really painful, in whatever
make
way.
sure you have an advocate.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't have an advocate in the hospital,
someone who speaks for you
in those moments, so that they can titrate up, so you don't get blasted away.
Right. Because I believe there could be a balance in there.
Yeah, there is.
With keeping the pain managed and keeping your level of consciousness, so you don't get so zoned out you can't be present.
I'd like to add to
Someone
that
else?
a little bit about pain and pain management. Having been with a couple of people that were in severe pain, and the decision that they made to actually take the pain medication just to help them relax into their process, helped me to see the value in medication, because I also came from that school of, oh no, it'll take the whole experience away. But having witnessed at least two people that were very close to me that were really in so much pain that they couldn't have anybody around them, they couldn't eat properly, they couldn't do any of their bodily functions because they were in such excruciating pain, that it gave me a whole new perspective about the value of medication. And I'm holistic, and I don't really even take an aspirin. So for me, it was like an awakening, and it made me realize that if I was in excruciating pain, I don't really like being in pain. I remember when I was pregnant with my twins, I went for 40 hours without any pain medication, which made everybody very uncomfortable. And eventually the doctors had to knock me out anyway, but I have a new respect for pharmaceuticals, and it has its place, especially during the death cycle, and managing that. And for the other people around who have to experience and caregive to somebody who's in extreme pain. It's not very easy all around, so I've come to appreciate it more.
Our mind thinks we're in control. And our cells, we have 10 trillion cells in us. And on us, at any one point in time, on us or in us is 100 trillion microbes. 10 times this number of cells. And our mind's walking around like we're in control and we know what we're doing. And we're a skin bag of chemicals. So, at some level.
Chemical soup.
Yeah. So the problem is people aren't given choices, and people don't get right to manage how they want to do it. And everybody's different.
So. I don't have a strong feeling about any of the subjects. So.
What if you were bedridden and you needed fluids, you needed oxygen, you needed to be fed intravenously? I mean, would you want that forever, or would you at some point want to stop?
I wouldn't want it forever, I know that. Yeah, I don't know.
How would you answer your question?
I think I would want some. I don't think that I would refuse. I mean, at this point in my life, if something happened, and I don't think that I would refuse those things for a certain period of time, because I feel like I do have a lot of life left, and that I could be in an accident, and that I could still have a experience something in this earth plane that would be of benefit. And so
What if you knew there was no hope for you to recover?
if I was just going to be a vegetable, like lay and be a vegetable.
If you had a terminal disease or your old age and there was no hope of you improving,
If I had a terminal disease,
and there was no hope of you improving,
would
you want all that intervention of breathing, a machine breathing
Yeah.
for you,
I don't think so.
food, intravenous, if you couldn't feed yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I would want it long term. And I mean, hopefully I would be able to make the choice at the point that I wanted, if I wanted to say stop, that I could say that. As far as making like a living will right now and deciding those things, it feels like I don't know.
Do you all have any room?
I don't have a living will.
I don't have one yet.
How would you answer?
It's on my to-do list.
One thing, if you haven't, has everybody seen Harold and Maude?
What's that?
Have you all seen Harold and Maude? The movie Harold
Yeah,
and
a long
Maude?
time ago, yeah.
Have you seen it? It's your assignment. If you haven't seen the movie Harold and Maude, it's an assignment for you to go watch the movie Harold and Maude.
time to see
It's
it
about suicide and death and taking your own life. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I saw a long time ago. So answer the question that you asked.
Well, I saw my mother die, and the doctor gave her 3 days, but that must be their magic untrue number, because she lived 2 weeks. And when more people were there, she was vital. And then as some of my sister had to leave, I saw her energy drop, but then she came up again. And we really had some quality time together. She had oxygen because that was the only way she could breathe. She could feed herself, but sometimes she needed help being fed. And she died consciously. She had
She did that consciously.
yes, she had medication to to manage her breathing because she needed to be relaxed. Otherwise, she'd have an anxiety attack because she wasn't getting enough air. Yeah. So I felt it was good that she had just enough drugs, the tiniest amount. She was able to feed herself, or someone would help her. And she died awake. I was looking at her right in the eye. She took one last breath and died, and I felt very good about that. The day before, it was like she was happy, flowers came, and the day before was a whole different scenario. Then that night she went downhill. But so I feel good about all that kind of managed care.
What I'm hearing you say is you felt the value in that.
Yes, it was very valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's
For sure.
I don't think it's a black and white issue because my first husband, I was told that he only had several hours to live, and we were waiting for his twin brother to arrive from the East Coast to the West Coast. But he was ready to go. He was unconscious, and we had talked about it, and he said, please don't keep me alive artificially. And it was very beneficial that he not be kept alive with artificial means, as it was imminent. He was dying like in several hours. We would have loved to keep him alive for days, to have him around, but it wasn't the thing to do.
So I'd like to just stand back on these three areas and before we get into pathways, I'd love to look at values just for a minute. And if we could popcorn. What kind of values do you feel relate to the pathway that you feel is the right path or potentially the right path? Let's just stay with the values for a few minutes.
Not hurting someone else.
Not hearing someone else?
Hurting.
Not hurt. So there's a very deep value here. Not hurting someone else. What if it's for their own good?
I think
No, wait. What if it, every time I get my little shot, it hurts me. But, I'm really serious. This is a moral conflict that many clinicians face. And it's a conflict that many families face. So, can you help me with that?
Well, I think it works differently for everybody. But I know one man who attempted suicide at least 3 or 4 times, and the only thing that kept him from doing it was when he would put his gun to his head, he could see his mother. He couldn't pull the trigger.
So let me repeat, because I don't think RD can hear, and also do speak louder, that the only thing that kept this particular man alive when he put a gun to his head was thinking of his mother.
How much it would hurt her.
How much it would hurt her. Mm-hmm. It's very powerful motivation. Often suicide, it's very interesting, it's what we call misplaced concreteness. The body gets sort of mistaken for the non-local self and it gets killed. And what wants to die is the ego. So that's a powerful thing that he thought of his mother, because it's a deep act of unselfishness. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Not harming others. Good. What other values are important in these 3 areas for us to?
Personal choice.
Personal choice. Say something more about that.
Just that you would have the ability to make your own decisions.
One wants to have the ability to, not only the ability, but to be supported in making your own decisions. Like, yeah, it's my life, I want to deal with it my way. Mm-hmm. What if your choice harms others? So that's a tough one. That's a conflict. Mm-hmm. Like the choice to kill yourself, or the choice to have or not to have an intervention, or the choice to manage your pain in a way that might, because of your particular biochemistry, affect your personality so you're not as relational. Tom.
Doesn't your life belong to everyone?
So Tom asks, is it really your life? Doesn't your life belong to everyone? Hey.
So then what? Your life is not a possession.
Right. Your life, says Tom, is not a possession. Right. And thus you
have a broader perception of it. It's a different value. Not like currency, not something you can take to the bank.
It's not like currency you can take to the bank.
More like air and water.
It's more like air and water. Freely given, freely taken away. Your life is not a possession. It belongs to everyone. That would inform every decision that you make. Need we say more?
You're identified with your soul, and therefore you make decisions about the incarnation. That's of value. I'll tell you a suicide story. A suicide story. I'll tell you a suicide story. A lama, a Tibetan lama, sent out invitations to have tea at Thursday at 2. He said, I'm going to die at that time. And his friends, they all came, and he died at that time. That was the soul figuring he was finishing with the incarnation.
Why do you call that a suicide story, Rhonda?
But it is a suicide.
Is it?
Yes. He's taking his own life.
You know, every time our ego dies, it is a suicide. Every time we take ourselves to the edge. As I said, it's so often a case of misplaced concreteness. What wants to die isn't the body. The body will do its own thing in its own time. But it is this sense of separateness that we call the ego. But I feel like, you know, what you're saying, Tom, is so closely linked to the story that Ramdas just told. We belong to everyone, so we should invite everyone to the tea. When we, you know, intuit it is the moment that our body is going to drop off, that it's going to unbind. to lift a cup. Yes, Tom.
I was sitting sessions at Zen Center in San Francisco, and I was living outside of San Francisco at the time. And it was known that Suzuki Roshi was dying. And I went in for a session, and Suzuki Roshi died in the first period of Zazen in that session. And by the same definition, that was suicide.
Yeah.
Or he had that much control over his death.
Tom was at the San Francisco Zen Center. He'd gone into sesshin, which is an intensive retreat, and in the first period of that sesshin, Suzuki Roshi died. And Tom would define that kind of a death in the same way I think we're speaking as suicide. That is, there's an element of awareness about impending death and choicefulness about the moment of death, really unbinding and letting go. How did that affect you? That's dead.
I didn't have much to do with Zen Center after that. Caregiving was my other teacher. Went to Minneapolis shortly after that, and that community had an incredible impact on me. But my practice took its own course. Pretty much entangled in worldliness and money, jobs, wife, children. But the value I placed on it was always extreme. And that man's presence was something I had never experienced. And that presence was I was totally sold on that. That's all I need. But I found it quite rare. And I still find it quite rare.
Suzuki Roshi perceived you, perhaps, or you perceived him, or mutually so. It's incredible the way Ram Dass talks about his teacher. It's really a short time that you had with your teacher before he died, but he showed you who you really were. And it sounds as if Suzuki Roshi did the same for you. So we're going to look forward to you ringing that bell. Yeah. You know, you had a question about pain management.
Well, I just asked you to cover it. I was hoping we'd get there, and we're doing pretty good.
Okay, great. Yes.
In our group, we talked about dementia and Alzheimer's. And I had that in my family and witnessed how difficult it was growing up. And with my father. So I have a lot of fear about it. And a part of me would like to be able to suicide if I know that that's happening. And would like to be able to suicide because of what I experienced in my family is so much fear and such a burden of responsibility that I wouldn't want my family to experience if that happened to me. And someone in our group also said once the person is past a certain point and can't make the choice, then I wonder, is it the family's issue? Is it my ego right now that's concerned and maybe identifying, like you say with Ram Dass, and would want to take care of things now? And perhaps, I say this with tremendous emotion, but perhaps going past that point to that place of innocence is a place beyond the ego, for all I know. But I didn't experience it as a blessing with the people in my family who had it.
Has anyone else here known that kind of experience in their family? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about, I'm not sure on the definition here. If somebody smokes cigarettes their whole life and eats Twinkies and hot dogs and then dies of cancer or cardiac arrest, was that suicide or not?
Well, I think it's pretty stupid. Yeah, I mean, that's ignorance. That's definitely a stupid way to live. But I want us to stay, Bodhi, if we can, just on this issue of dementia, because actually many of us will have this experience personally, or our families will be afflicted by it. And it's a very tough issue to witness. I just want to tell a story that is a little more hopeful, because we know many not so hopeful stories. Remember Hobbes?
Yeah, I'm just reading the book.
Beautiful, huh?
Beautiful book.
Remember the name of it?
Oh boy.
Yeah, same here. Anyway.
It's by his...
You know what? I knew you were going to say that. Okay, I feel better already. So this is a friend of Artie's and mine named Hobbes, who was a Quaker and a person really dedicated to anti-war activities his whole life. And about the middle of his life, he became a Buddhist, and he was a very devoted and deeply practicing Buddhist. He also had done a tremendous amount of therapy. And he was also quite smart, in addition to being one of the kindest, most loving, dear people I've ever met in my life. But what he was, more than many things that we could say, this is a horrible word, you're going to really get annoyed with me. He had really processed so much stuff in his life. He really had worked on himself. He really practiced the Brahma Viharas. He then became a Zen practitioner and was totally devoted to that. Then he went back to Vipassana. He'd really worked for the well-being of an incredible number of people. And he was a really humble person. And it was a trip being with him, because it was kind of like he didn't have a long bag. Remember Robert Bly's thing, what's in your long bag? The little book of the shadow. He didn't really have much of a long bag left. So as his dementia came on, he and I had the joy, or he and his wife and I, of spending time together, including going on camping trips and practicing together. And there was one camping trip we were on, there was a 7-year-old kid and Hobbes. And they were like in the same spirit. It was just so wonderful. His dementia devolved into, full-blown Alzheimer's. And he was really luminous. He was so free of apology and shame as the dementia unfolded. It's like if I got dementia, I'd probably be apologizing. It just wasn't there. He had let go of regret. He had forgiven himself completely. There were not unbetrayed parts of his own life. And he had, before he entered into the state of dementia, he was in a state of grace, in a very beautiful and ordinary way. And this he carried unto his death. And as he was dying, people just loved hanging out with him, because here he was, no conceptual mind at all. And he was kind of like Ram Dass. No. I didn't mean that. But, he was kind of in a really good mood all the time. He was blissed. So, in watching Hobbes' journey, it was such a wake-up call for me. And it has to do with doing your work, being really self-honest, applying yourself to whatever path it is that you're on, and make sure that, it's a scrubber. Your stroke can be your scrubber. Who knows what gift will be given. So I think it's, on one hand, On the other, in terms of who wants to live that kind of a life and be a burden to others. That's the pattern, just like Ram Dass looking out and all those nurses, doctors, like, oh, it's bad. Oh, it's bad? Okay, it's bad. So now that imprint is inside of you, but you really need to scrub it out. And, you are doing your work. Just go for it while your conceptual mind is in place, and you can have fun doing it. And then the conditioning that you engender can be carried across. I mean, I had another experience with a really amazing woman who had dementia, who, Alzheimer's. And again, it was very much the same as Hobbes. She'd done her work. She just blissed out all the time in that state. It was so strange. And then she just kind of disappeared. And so every person that she met was okay. She couldn't remember anybody she knew, her husband or her children. So everybody that she met it was okay. She had that kind of feeling about her. So it's opening up that feeling in your heart. Now.
Hobbes' wife has just written a book about her experience. And she had done practice. And because of that, and because she and Hobbes contracted together, they would this illness they were together in it, and she grew and grew, and it was hard because Hobbes would just in and out. And she dealt with change. I think the family, a regular family with an Alzheimer's member in it, is very hard. It's hard, you're right. But if it's a family in which work has been done, boy, there's nothing, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
What Ram Dass is saying about relationship, began our journey together 2.5 days ago. It is about relationship and about promises to keep. and to recognize that the caregiver is on a journey as well, which, as in Olivia's case, was extraordinarily transformative and just sort of made her into a saint. But the cost is not inconsequential. And you know something, I think many of us older people are fearful of this. And it again comes back to the issue around these three questions that we were asked to explore, and that has to do with control.
You know, there's in spiritual circles, they say, don't get involved in past or in future.
Don't tell him. You saw the film.
When anybody tells me they're losing their memory, I said, good.
Bodhi?
I heard a story on public radio about a man whose mother had Alzheimer's, and she chose to take her own life, and she practiced. And everybody in the family knew that she was going to do it, and she did want to do it while she could. And so of course, some of the people in the family were against it, and he felt like he just had to support her decision. And what he said was the hardest thing for him was that she had to be alone, that he would have liked to have been there to hold her hand. But I think in that there's what this person mentioned before about choice, that's her choice. And it could be, you could enter into bliss states when you don't know anybody, but it's your choice. And I think her mother had Alzheimer's, and she had gone through that with her mother, and she was very, very clear, and she did take her own life.
Well, taking your own life to avoid something in life is avoiding a lesson. It's a hard lesson, but it's a very hard lesson.
Can we run a hard theoretical? Do a little. Imagine that you have advanced cancer with intractable pain. And there is a way for you to gracefully end your life through a combination of pharmaceuticals. And imagine that this has been a really long road. It's not just a 6-month thing. We're talking about years of interventions. And this is pain that is beyond comprehension in intensity. And you're really unable to do anything but be swamped by the pain and the condition of your body. And you see your family members are really stressing around this. And you had a means to liberate everyone, yourself and the whole family. I'm not saying, I really don't want you to answer. You know what I mean? It was not for us to discuss. But imagine being a hospice person in the midst of this, or a friend in the midst of this, where the values kind of fall equally on either side of the fence. So that's a really powerful thing, without the lessons that the body can teach us, or prolonging your life so that you can be a instigator of compassion for others, or this will really wreck my next incarnation, or I don't want to cause my family grief. All of the incredible things we might tell ourselves. But imagine we have Tom's attitude, which, I basically belong to the world. And if I belong to the world, what is the greatest service? To hasten my death, or to bite the bullet and learn from it? So your value of not harming oneself or others, include oneself in that equation, is really important to consider. Your value of choice, that we want to have some control and to be able to choose, is also important. And Tom's value of his vision, really, of understanding that we are not a possession, we belong to everything. And then we're faced with this raw moment. I'm going to ask you, what would you do if you were the person in this situation?
With Alzheimer's?
No, this is if you were a person who had 10 years of a cancer journey with many interventions, really rough, stem cell transplants, chemo, and
that was my mother's
journey.
Trip. Yeah.
Okay. And you get to a point in the journey where you are in intractable pain. And you also see that everyone around you is in intractable pain, completely stressed and unable to really deal with the futility, apparent futility of this situation. What would you do?
Well, it depends on how heavy the pain is. I mean,
Heavy.
1
to 10, it's a 10. Unmanageable.
Well, I'd suicide.
Yeah, me too.
Because that pain is unmanageable in sadhana.
Yeah. I actually don't want him to answer that question because I took a risk here today. We've been trust building, but I have to say, Ram Dass's answer is an answer that is really, it's a profoundly honest response. And it's not a prescription.
I was curious because of your seeming definition
I see.
I didn't hear that.
So what she said was that when you said suicide, would you be able to do it from your own will and commitment and base of practice, or would you seek assistance?
I would stop eating.
Mm-hmm. I would stop eating. Yeah. Well, that's true always.
I walked in on somebody very close to me that decided they didn't want to live anymore.
That what?
Decided they didn't want to live anymore, and basically they thought they were dead. In the moment, I saved their life. Because
Say what?
I chose to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
Another friend had been sick for many years with a very serious illness called supranuclear palsy. It's sort of a little bit of all of the worst ones you can think of, where everything shuts down one at a time. And his choice was, when I can no longer swallow, then I want to check out. And it was going to be through Oregon with a doctor. And they wanted us to be there. And I couldn't decide, after just saving one person, if I was there to help somebody else exit. And I sat with it for a really long time, and I decided I was going to go. And the last thing the person wanted was a lemon meringue pie, because they knew they weren't going to be able to swallow anymore. And in the doctor-assisted suicide program in Oregon, they give you Nebutol, a big cough syrup bottle of it. And you can't necessarily find a pharmacist that will fill the prescription because it's their choice whether they want to do it, whether you have a prescription or not. It took quite a few pharmacies and one particular man to choose to fill it. And we had to be there when he was going to be there. And right at the end, one of the other people that was with us went out to get coffee. His wife fell asleep in the bed, and it was 6 hours later, and I was the one that was there holding him when he took his last breath. And I still haven't figured out, through all of these things, what I would want to do at the end, or if whatever I did was right or wrong, or okay or not okay. And what I came to was that maybe none of that really matters, the okay or not okay, but what you do what you feel if you're doing it from what you feel and right deep inside of yourself at that moment for that person or for yourself, then it's okay. And it's something that, whether it's you that's dying or you that's the one that's going to keep living, if it's coming from really deep, that you feel like you've done what was appropriate, I guess is the word, then it's appropriate. And you don't know until that moment that you're there. My mother is just starting to get dementia. My mother has told me for years that was the thing she was afraid of the most, was losing her mental capacity. And then her brother last year died from dementia. And then this year my mother started having dementia. So this is the thing she's been frightened of the most, that I've been hearing about. But what I'm finding right now is that she laughs about it. It's just my memory. And so sometimes I see with the things we think we're most fearful of, when they happen, they're no longer a fear. And when we do things that we're not sure of, if we really do them from our inside, where we really believe, then we're okay. And that's the most we can possibly do. Because we're all going to live and we're all going to die, and who knows what's right. Yeah. And that's all I can do. Yeah.
Wonderful. So this feels like the perfect place to conclude our journey for this time. you.